Okay, it's time to check it out. The good, the bad, and the ugly. What sort of a session do we have in 2013? We're going to find out. Representatives Fale and Fukumoto in the House as we give them a report card. Well, the state legislature has come to the end of these 2013 session. One would think they'd all be surfing this morning, but not to in the case of our two guests this morning. First of all, we welcome back Beth Fukumoto. Good morning. Are you mixed emotions? I mean, you had this big run at the end, right? It was kind of hectic.
Yes,
is it
very
nice
hectic.
Is it done?
It's the session is over. I don't think our jobs are done, but the session is over.
Yeah, there's a lot of misconception, right? I bet even between your friends they say, "Oh, wow, you're lucky. You only work 60 days a year, right?"
Right.
Not true. Okay. Richard Fale joins us also. For those of you that don't know, good morning, Richard. And number one, and secondly, what's your district?
My district is District 47. It represents part of eastern Oahu, east and northern Oahu. Mm-hmm. It's the largest geographical district on the island of Oahu.
Which means that you got the most shoe leather to burn off when it comes time to go door to door, right?
Exactly. And it goes from Waihole to Wailua.
Mm-hmm. Overall, and I know that from most of us in our business think that it seems like the two parties were talking to each other a little bit better. There's a little bit more, cooperation between the House and the Senate, and even maybe a little more discourse between the administration and the branches of government. I know that you haven't had a chance to rate too many of these sessions, but is it too early to ask you for a grade rating on what you thought about this year?
I'm still going through all the papers that need to be graded.
Mm-hmm.
I should say. One session ended. I started from the top of. When session started, and I'm currently moving through. Currently, right now, I would say we're at the B+ range as far as what we were able to accomplish and what didn't go through.
What's your gut feeling on things like maybe the Council on Revenues and the fact that we are, even if it may not be true, we are led to believe that our bad times are over, that good times are here again?
I have a huge disagreement with some of those with some of those projections, just because just like the Boston incident, when the next 9/11, it's really not a question of if, but when it happens. And as we were going through the numbers that were coming in, I wanted to ask, are we ready for that next 9/11 event if/when it were to occur? And given how we really haven't been able to diversify off our tourism base with the economy, I'm really concerned that we would still be extremely vulnerable to events that would have...
especially here, right? I mean, one bad thing's happened, people cancel flights. I mean, people cancel flights, we're out of money.
No, that's the first thing that happens.
Yeah. So that being said, and by the way, and even though we're not going to probably be spending too much time on this, I'll get both of your thoughts on this, starting with you, Richard, and that is, I think since 9/11, that we have spent a huge slice of our gross national product on defense and security, on measures to prevent another 9/11. In other words, this is something that's not going to go away. Even if there were no more attacks, we've been told, and probably truthfully, that we better be prepared because they're coming.
Oh, that's that.
Look how much money we're talking.
We're talking in the hundreds of billions of dollars range, and this is money, of course, with that we're going to have to reach into our taxpayer pockets to pull out.
Look at all the other things we could have done. If you could have written a bunch of your own stuff about education, about infrastructure, about rebuilding ourselves. That's not going to happen because we're spending them on TSA and rockets.
That's something I think we actually need to look at. Israel seems to have the smartest way in which they approach security issues. They do it at, I think, a fraction of the cost that we're currently doing it at. And I believe it's a model that we need to look to, because it's just not sustainable to be looking at limiting the freedoms of the people here in the United States of America, and not really certain exactly if we're going to be achieving the goals that we've set as far as national security.
And Beth Fukumoto, once again, remind everybody your district.
It's District 36, which is Milani Malka.
Mm-hmm. And what about your constituents? I mean, do you ever talk about the big picture? Are they more or less concerned with things like the early education and stuff like that? Because in your area, and same as Richard's, really, these are growing areas of the community with lots of kids.
As far as early education goes, actually, I think I was one of the few districts that I largely heard negative things about early education. People didn't seem to want it.
What would you attribute that to, do you think?
Well, we have one of the highest rates of preschool attendance in our district, up to 80%, even 90% in some of our elementary schools. The kids are already going to preschool, and parents are doing that on their own, so they didn't really see a need.
Yeah, very interesting, because it does boil down to that, doesn't it? I mean, do you think that in some cases, some of that legislation would have been aiming at, you just drop your kids off in the morning, we take care of everything? We feed them, we educate them, we keep them busy while you're working?
Yeah, definitely. And I think some of my parents, especially parents in my district, didn't feel like that was a good idea. It wasn't the way to go, especially the way the programs were designed. It wasn't going to help families and help families sort of get to know each other and help parents get to know their kids better. It was going to take kids away from their parents.
We always want to think that, because of the recession, we spent less money. But I was choking when I found out that we're looking at an $11 billion budget. I mean, however, let's say that you could pick out one thing that you were unhappy with. We passed this thing, and we're going to live with it, and it's going to, quote, balance, maybe, we hope. What's something, and I'll ask both of you this, what's something that you're not real tickled with about what's new cost to us?
I think the biggest new cost is the early childhood programs. There are certain programs that we did put in the budget that I think were a good idea. For example, Preschool Open Doors is a really good program, and we funded that a little bit more to take care of the kids that are currently going to junior kindergarten. But besides that, I think the constitutional amendment that we passed that's going to create $100 million a year in more cost to the state, I think was a big mistake.
By the way, Richard, let me ask you this. What is the next step on this? I mean, we know that there's going to be this constitutional amendment on the ballot in 2014. And I would imagine that it's really important on how it's worded and what, what we're going to be sold is why we should be for it or against it.
Yes, and this is a big fight that's going to occur between a number of entities that are both for and against. But I couldn't agree with Representative Fukumoto more about, I think this was the worst thing that we actually passed this year. Instead of addressing the issues which we currently have between K through 12, which we have a huge number, a whole host of issues from K through 12, and instead of focusing on what we can do to address the current issues with the current education system that we have with the Department of Education, we said, well, we need to add another multi-$100 million program and hope that it's going to solve the problem. No pilots, no accountability, we're gonna, these are the metrics in which
just
we're
throw
gonna
more money at it.
Just throw more money. And
really.
this is hundreds of millions of dollars, and there's no checks to make sure that we're gonna be set on a certain track where it's measurable, where we're going to be able to go back to my community and say, okay, we've set ourselves on a course where we're going to spend hundreds of millions of your dollars on this program, and I can't go back and say, these are the standards that we're going to hit. This is exactly why we're doing this, and if we're going to achieve these goals, and this is how we're achieving them. I sat through the finance hearing where the governor and the administration made the case for the preschool program, and even those who are going to be the boots on the ground, who are going to be responsible for implementing this, could not articulate how the program was going to work, why it was going to work, and what are the measurable standards we're going to hold ourselves to.
It's so hard to undo it, right? I mean, if we'd have passed this, lock, stock, and barrel, and then just wash our hands and say, well, we did a great job, let's move on.
And that's the whole problem with the constitutional amendment, because once we amend the Constitution, we're essentially putting ourselves, we're putting this in concrete. We're putting this as the foundation of the state of Hawaii, and we're committing ourselves to these expenditures indefinitely into the future.
Okay, we got plenty more to come, including your opportunity to join us. I'm getting an email, but remember, no email during this session. You got to connect with us directly. Talk to Representatives Fukumoto or Fale on the telephone only, 296-KHNR. That's 296-5467. Here's Malin Moore. He's got traffic. We'll be right back.
AM 690, KHNR. More live hours, better talk radio. Now back to the Mike Buck Show.
Okay, I'm sure that a lot of you had the opportunity to go through the paper yesterday talking about how the major bills fared at the Capitol. They did a pretty good recap about the different types of bills, whether they were government or business, education, about the ones that passed, which is on top of the line, and the ones that failed at the bottom. And we're sort of getting to know Richard Fale a little bit. Beth Fukumoto's been here before, and we thought it'd be sort of neat to get both their perspectives because the session is over, but the work is not. And I know that the paper, Richard's already looking at, all right, well, who's running in 2014. I think it's more important to discuss how we were able to make things work this session, and let's put a grade on it. Like you mentioned before, we're in the the maybe A-, B+ sort of an area with regard. What are some of the things that that you would have liked to have seen reconsidered that died, or more important, some of the things that made it that you're unhappy with?
There's a couple of things. At the top of the list, it would have been the audit of the Department of Education. My community, Mike, has a 79.2% of the kids that go to school in my community in Ha'ula are on Title I funds, right? So we have a severe poverty issue that affects my community. And the way these families are going to get out of poverty is through education. Now, I want to be able to go back to my community, since the Department of Education, our spending on education is the single largest expenditure that we have in the state of Hawaii. Now, I want a greater accountability because the future of the kids in my community depend on the way we're effectively spending our education dollars. Sure. So being able to audit the Department of Education so I can go back to my community and show those parents these are the areas in which we're spending our money on education. This is exactly how it's going to put you on a path or a track to success in the future. But I'm not able to exactly do that right now. And so having an audit of the Department of Education, I think, would have gone a long way in helping me give greater accountability to my community in regards to how we're spending that money.
I think there are a lot of questions out there about the word audit, because I know that during the session we're talking about the DOE hadn't been really thoroughly audited in years, but they do these little pocket audits, and they think that makes everybody happy. We're taking a look at another thing right now, and I know that it's going to sort of sway us around from the conversation a little bit, but the Department of Hawaiian Homelands is under extreme scrutiny right now, and maybe needed so. Maybe it needs to be that way. When you talk about audits, do you think, Richard, that we are spending a lot of government dollars on things that an audit would address, and that we wouldn't be in the financial condition we are if we really watch the money a little closer?
This is something, I think, Mike, that we can actually make the most progress on here in the state of Hawaii, is being able to, every time we pass a measure, passing the standards in which we are going to hold ourselves to when we're spending every single dime that we move out, so that we can go back and say, this was what we hoped for, this is what actually happened, and this is the reassessment of how we should move forward in the future. But that we're not having that accountability attached to all the major spending items that we go through, like the one that we're just going through with early childhood education. Now, with each of the departments, I should be able to go back and tell my community exactly where the money went, why it went there, and what were the results.
Just like a family.
Just like a family.
Exactly like a family.
Now this is
Sunday meeting.
This is a big example. When we moved the energy and food security tax through a few years ago, I had at the table the Department of Agriculture and also the Department of Agriculture and it was DBED and the Department of Agriculture. And I asked them, how much more food secure and how much more energy secure are we now than we were 3 years ago when this measure passed?
Right.
And they couldn't give me a single metric showing.
Yeah,
and I said, that's a huge problem. That's a huge problem. Until you're giving me accountability for the resources we've dedicated to our various departments, it's very difficult for me to justify support for these for tax increases, for measure increases, because I need to go back to my community and say, this is what we're doing with your money. And I haven't been able to do that. And so that's, I think, probably the single biggest step that we could actually accomplish in the future.
Okay, now, Rep. Fukumoto, you said the same thing, that throughout your district, the early education thing was backburnered. But there's a lot of people, and Richard's district would be one of them, and yours in some respects, where there is all of this assistance, and a lot of parents that are trying say, look, my kid can't compete. Without this early education, I've got people down the street that can afford the daycare and the education that I can't give them. So when my kid goes into kindergarten, he or she is unprepared.
Right. I think that's the mistake that people are making when they look at some of these bills. What we passed was the first thing we passed is preschool open doors, and that's a needs-based program, one that already exists in the Department of Human Services, and that's money that can go already to child care providers and
right.
the religious preschools that we have open and the non-religious schools that we have open. The constitutional amendment, which is what Governor Abercrombie actually wants, would not go to religious providers, and it would not go to our existing public schools. So we're looking at creating entirely new schools,
Our opportunity to ring
Right.
the cash register.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
and
Very
it can
spooky.
only go to non-religious schools. So I think that's the difference. I think people that are looking at it saying, well, I need to be able to send my kids to preschool, but everybody else around me can afford it and I can't. We already have programs for them. We just need to maybe put a little bit more money into that.
Okay, we're going to talk about gambling. We're going to talk about some other things, some traffic things, the red light cams and all that stuff. But first, let's go to Joe in Paoa, who joins us with a question for Representatives Fale and Fukumoto about early childhood education. Good morning, Joe.
It's nice to talk to you this morning.
Thank you.
With this early childhood education, the preschool, and then we give them breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and they want to do with the summer vacations, and it seems like it's more and more government. I don't think that's the way that we survive, and that's sustainable. I think it's more better we stay home and grow our food and let.
Yeah, I knew that's where you're going, Joe. Joe, you got to stick to topic on this program. In the first place, it's not breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And even though you have another agenda, it's not the agenda that we're talking about this morning. So can you understand that?
Yeah, what I'm
Okay, good. So see you. Come on. Let's go to this though. This guy, by the way, Joe, nice try. Jeez. Let's grow our own food and send our own kids to. Let's talk about some of the other things. And I think that, for instance, one of the things that Speaker Suki was vehemently strong about is the red light cameras. There's a lot of people that were in favor of that, and yet it seems like, I guess, from public outcry, first you, Richard Fale, did you vote in favor of this cam bill? And if not, why not?
I didn't support the red light camera bill. I didn't have too much of an issue with it. This is something that actually did have a pilot program, so we could actually get feedback on it and see how
you
it
said
went.
that pilot's key, isn't it?
Pilots are key because we need the metrics to show whether it's achieving the goals that we set for it. The major issue why I didn't support it is that I think this just isn't a priority, I believe, for the state of Hawaii. And we need to set correct priorities. And remember, we're dedicating hundreds of man hours to every single piece of paper that comes through that building. And so given the high priority issues that we have in the state of Hawaii, like the poverty issues that affect many of the communities throughout the state, I just didn't think red light cams were necessarily a top priority for the people of Hawaii.
Yeah. And however, those of us that live in opportunities where there are a lot of lights might be different. Maybe you're represented. There's not a whole lot of lights there. What about you, Beth? Same thing. This is a bill that some people said it's a no-brainer. If you're speeding and if you go through a light, somebody should catch you.
Yeah. I think there are some people in my community would like it. People still remember the van cams, and people are still worried about that. But I think that what we were looking at was a little different than the van cams. Yeah.
Okay, and I know that in the big picture, that wasn't as important as some of the other stuff. I do know that every time we look at budgets, they look at ways of increasing taxes or increasing revenues. And Representative Fale, I already sort of know the answer to this, but this year it appears to me that gaming came a little bit close to being looked at than it has in the past, and it was soundly defeated again. What sort of message do you think that sends to people that would try to rewrite additional legislature reopening the door for gambling of some kind in Hawaii?
Well, I don't think gambling is going to be going away anytime here in the near future, and it's something that's going to be constantly recurring every legislative session. So I think every time they gain a couple of inches every year, and so it's something that's on its way, and we're going to have to look at it again in the future. It's just something that we're going to have to be vigilant about as legislators.
Yeah, we keep that. We got more. There's no on the soda, no on the gasoline, no on this, no on that. They all look like they're going to fix the revenue wagon. Let's find out how we did fix it. We got more coming up, including your opportunity. Once again, a little reminder, I'm getting a lot of email. We're not going to even open email during this session. If you want to talk with Reps Fale or Fukumoto, you can do that by calling 296-5467. That's 296-KHNR. And When we come back after that, we're going to go back to Washington, D.C., to our friend Ricky Ellison, former 49er, and talk about missile defense. But right now it's 7:30, time for news. Well, it's hot. And it was hot and heated in the closing days of the legislature. But they finished on time and on budget. They passed the budget. We breathed a huge collective sigh of relief at some of the things that didn't pass. But we kind of got shocked at some of the things that did. And that's what we're talking about today with Representatives Beth Fukumoto and Richard Fale in the studio talking with us. And the only way you can join the conversation is by picking up the phone and dialing 296-KHNR or 296-5467. Before we get back into some of these bills specifically, let's go back to the telephones, gals and guys. Put on your headsets and let's go talk with Adriana, who is joining us this morning from, I think, Waipahu. Good morning.
Good morning. It's actually Wahiwa.
Oh, hi, Wahiwa. Okay.
Good morning. I was a teacher for a long time in California, and they had a preschool program over there. It worked wonderful, but it has to be accountability for the teachers, and there has to be results. And if it doesn't, it just becomes a babysitting program. And I think it's the wrong thing to do, especially nowadays. And where are they going to put these classes? It's important to, we already have 24 to 1. And now, where are we going to get these buildings? And there's a lot of issues that need to be addressed before a program like this, is put here in Hawaii. Because I know in California now they took it out because they don't have the room for it, they don't have the money for it, and now, some of the programs were lost.
I'm really glad, Adriana, that you called. I want you to hang on so both Beth and Richard can address that. It must be gratifying, first, Beth, to have a teacher with that attitude, because you would think that a teacher would want this because technically it would make their job easier.
Right. I think a lot of teachers say, yeah, if kids come to me in kindergarten better educated already, it would be great. But the question that you raise is whether or not we're going to do it correctly, and I think that's the concern that Richard and I both have with this program, is that it's not going to get done correctly.
I would bet you, Richard, that there's a lot of people like Adriana, a lot of teachers that realize, okay, you can't just throw a bucket full of money at it and think you're going to fix it.
I think Adriana is actually hitting the nail right on the head, is that when we sat through these hearings and the administration came down to talk about the program, even they couldn't articulate whether is this a daycare program or is this an education program. And because it's being sold to us as early childhood education, but they can't even actually attach education to the actual program. So they actually did say that it is just a daycare program for the time being. And I don't think, if you're being completely honest with the people of Hawaii, that they would justify those expenditures for a daycare program.
Yeah, Adriana, thanks very much for bringing that up. Appreciate your call.
Thank you.
Okay, I think too, and I want to move on to some other things, but I think too that I'm not sure what the fix is here. But I do know to expect in 2014 a tremendous amount of expenditure and lobbying. And I want to know, somebody asked off the air, and I usually don't take this, but Beth, who would benefit from this? I mean, what you're talking about is the Abercrombie program was not taking into account a lot of these faith-based organizations, even though that someone would be willing to address those concerns. Then it seemed to ignore them.
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one thing that I keep asking people or bringing up to people is that this is not going to benefit. It's going to be $100 million. It's not going to benefit our current public education system or our current private religious-based system. So we're talking about creating entirely new preschools or just benefiting the few preschools that we have. Okay,
Richard, one of the things that came up this session, and it really sounded good, it was by a group of teachers, albeit not sponsored or even supported by the HSTA, but there were a group of teachers that thought, well, we can fix this. We'll just put a 1% increase in the GET, and we'll earmark it for education. How slippery of a slope would that have been?
That's actually some of the long discussions that we had at the state legislature, and of course one of the biggest priorities, probably the top priority that I have for my community, are the poverty issues that affect my community, and I can't be supportive. It's as we're having these discussions, it's very difficult for me to support a measure that would increase the cost of living and not help my community come out of poverty, because there are serious issues that affect an individual. You don't live as long. You're not as healthy. You have a lot of pain and suffering that you go through if you're in poverty. Sure. And so an increase,
and that is the group of people that directly get affected right now by an increase in any tax, especially that one.
Yeah, and it would be amazing to me that we would be sitting in these committee hearings and we'll go through all these tax and fee increases, and then like the last measure on the docket that day would be, we need to subsidize this because the people in the community are in poverty or they can't. It's like, well, we just whacked them 20 times with different tax and fee increases, and then at the end, then we're suddenly realizing that the people are hurting from what we've just done to them.
Hey, Beth, I like this guy because he says it like it is. We whacked them. See, here's the thing. Do you actually think, and it's not just a minority, because if it was only the minority, a lot of these increases would have happened. How important is it, as stewards of our wallets, is it for you guys to take a look at that GE tax and say, this is already insidious. This is not a way to fix anything.
I think it's very important. One of the things, it actually surprised me that it didn't move further this year. When there was a bill that came up on second reading, and 38 Democrats had said that they would not vote to increase the GET.
Right.
But all 38 of those people voted to increase the GET on second reading. So after that, I was a little surprised that it didn't move any further, but it did stop. And I think it's important. I think this is a very regressive tax, and we need to pay attention to what it does.
There are a couple more. One would, and I don't want to say that it's affects, and I don't want to give Richard the opportunity to say, well, I come from a poor community. But the soda tax is another thing. Whether you take a consumer tax, and I don't want to, I hate to tell you this, but soda is not one of the three main food groups, and for a lot of our communities it is. But there were other things. The soda tax was one. The plastic bag tax was. You mentioned that there were a whole bunch of ones that got, but we had some that got approved. I mean, how many measures are on the above the line, past the list, that actually do increase fees? Because with all of the things that were going to fix the budget, and these things didn't get approved, what are they going to use?
Well, there is one that did make it through that I was very much opposed to, and it was the deposit beverage container program. This had to do with certain exemptions for food supplement that were exempt from the bottle tax. But like this is an exercise, Mike, that I go through whenever a measure comes before me, and it has to do with a tax or fee increase. This is the mental exercise that I go through. I put myself at the end of the line at Tamura's market over in Ha'ula, and I imagine me standing there with the bag, and as everybody comes through, everybody that comes through, I tell them to throw their pennies into the bag, right? Because I believe that if every legislator went through that mental exercise of actually looking the people in the eye that we're taking this money from, we would reconsider what we do. And when I had the director of the Department of Health and the director of the Department of Agriculture sitting before me, I asked them, if these measures would disproportionately impact those at the lowest economic bracket, would you reconsider your support for this measure? And the answer was yes. So I said, can we do some type of study that will actually tell us who this is gonna impact the most, so that we can base our assessment on that? But none of those measures actually give us that accountability when they come before us.
You know, one of the things that we talked about this year a lot was the importance of communicating your thoughts and questions and opinions to your legislators. Beth, I asked you about this. What was the best way? How was it for you this year with regards to input from your constituents?
It was great. I got a lot of input, and it's nice. Again, email's the best way for me, but it was nice to have that feedback, because sometimes you're just not sure when you're making a decision. You know, some things like a GET increase, we know how we feel about that and how people feel about that, but some other things we don't know.
Well, let's talk about one, and that's at one point in time, the big gorilla in the corner of the room was the PLDC, which got defeated. However, some shards of it did remain. Are you satisfied personally that bill that department should have gone away, and are you a little bit wary about how it may rebirth?
I am. I think the pieces that are still there are things that we've tried to improve accountability on, and I think that was the primary problem with it. I think everything that went through was fully vetted, which was, for me, the biggest issue with the PLDC.
Yeah, not much more coming up. If you'd like to join the conversation, it's easy. 296-KHNR is the number. That's 296-5467. Mail in more. With a check of traffic, it's 8...
It's the Mike Buck Show on AM 690 KHNR.
Okay, so I'm wondering down at the state legislature if everybody started doing the, the ride the pony when they play this on there. I don't think so. But anyway, here we are wrapping up the session a little bit and looking forward to what's next. We've actually been talking about some specific bills. And, I've been sort of selfish. If you'd like to join the conversation, the number is 296-KHNR. That's 296-5467. And one thing that I wanted to do, because Representatives Beth Fukumoto and Richard Fale are actually in the House, is give them the opportunity to maybe brag a little bit about stuff they achieved, and also thump a little bit about stuff they helped to defeat. Because I think that clearly, Beth, being a member of the minority was probably a slightly better experience this session than in the past. What do you attribute it to?
I think having a coalition was huge this year. It's the first time we've done it. I think we did have a lot of influence. It might not seem like it because we didn't get as much press as we have in the past. But if you look at the session and you look at all the taxes that we killed, all the fees that we killed, and we actually ended up with a relatively more fiscally conservative session than we have in the past. So,
a lot of that was augmented or buoyed by this false sense of security that things are getting better.
Right.
It would take, as we discussed earlier, just one little incident or a string of little incidents to take this revenue projections and make that budget not work.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think one of the things, though, that we did do that I thought was good is we did put money away to the Hurricane Relief Fund again. We put money away to the Rainy Day Fund.
Which had been taken.
Right, which had all been taken away. So we did replenish those funds just in case. And then we also did pay down some of the unfunded liabilities, which was huge. So we did spend a little bit more this session, but a lot of it went to things like that.
Okay, Richard, that being said, we have this monkey in our back, the unfunded liabilities that Beth mentioned. A magician can't make that go away. I mean, we are facing that, and I would imagine that a lot of that was tied to the purse strings of the teacher's contract, and yet all of these other ones that, once again, maybe a little caution to the wise about what if we don't get the revenue that we expect to get to pay for all this stuff.
Well, that's going to be working with the lack of predictability with the future is of course going to be a huge challenge. And the way that the administration had negotiated these contracts with labor, where the increases were something that were unexpected. That's just an example of things that we have to expect the unexpected. So we need to use a greater measure of fiscal responsibility when we approach these issues. And one of the biggest things that we actually have to do, and we've had talks of this with members of the business community, is that we really have to focus. It's a cliche type of everybody says it. We need to diversify the economy. We need to do all these. But this is something that we actually have to do, is that we are so vulnerable economically to shifts and changes within the overall world economy that we really haven't focused, and we haven't done any measures to change the economic infrastructure, especially the governing infrastructure, which was created to regulate an economy in the 50s and 60s, and update that to bring us into the information age. Because that is a huge... We are sitting between the largest economy in the world and the fastest growing economies in the world in Asia, and we are not taking advantage of the opportunities that presents us. And that's something we got to grow ourselves out of the fiscal problems that we have, and to resolve these fiscal liabilities. But it's going to take leadership, and unfortunately, the administration, instead of focusing on those areas, have decided to dump hundreds of millions of dollars into an untested early education program.
Yeah, and that that would be the other sets of checks and balances. As Richard was saying, Beth, that we have this huge responsibility, and yet with all of the things that were defeated, it makes you think, all right, where we can't print money. We do have this mandate to balance. There's one question that came up today, and I know it's a local one. We haven't really had time to look at it, but I saw where the mayor was looking at the state and saying, look, this this collection fee that you're charging for getting the 0.5% tax is enough to run the whole department, and yet it's only one part of it. And I do know that that there still is this them and us between the counties and the state. How do you resolve an issue like that? What is your personal thinking? Is the city and county paying too much to the state government for the administration of that fee?
I think they are probably paying a bit too much. The budget and finance could never justify what that 5% was going to. I do.
Actually,
10.
yeah,
Okay.
10%.
I do know that they don't need as much, but I think they need something.
Yeah, but I mean, when you take a look at the collections being enough to run almost the whole department, and that's a little thing. So I think maybe, and Richard, this goes to you, how do we get rid of this them and us thought? Because, I mean, we're all us. And sometimes you don't know what pothole is on what road is this, and there's the city and state things with the parks and everything else. Is the ledge, particularly, in your opinion, working better or worse with the counties than before?
It seems like we're still working through exactly the relationship that's going to be had between the leadership at the county level and the leadership at the state level. So it's kind of interesting to see as they kind of fill each other out. I think we're going to get a clearer picture next session on how exactly that's going to work out. One of the interesting things that I thought was pretty funny is that a member of the city council said that if something goes wrong with some of these measures that we're pushing forward, that the city should sue the state because the city's got to protect its taxpayers.
Sure.
I thought I thought it was strange because the city taxpayers are also the state taxpayers. There's no difference between the two. So I think there's kind of an illusion that there's a difference between the city and the county as far as which taxpayers belong to who, because obviously they're the same constituency, and there needs to be a greater cohesive working relationship between the two to better serve the communities that we live in.
We have had a change in leadership at the House, Beth. And now we're through our first session with Rep. Suki taking over the leadership of the majority party from Calvin Say, who has been, kind of quiet this session. Was that transition? It seems to me that Joe Suki had, at least in the public, had extended an olive branch to the minority and saying we can work together. Do you agree with that?
I think we can work together. I think that's absolutely true. And I think a lot of the good that we accomplished this session was because we did work together. At the end of the day, I think we do need more Republicans to have a true balance of power. But I do think we got closer to that than we have been. You know what?
Let's talk about that for the remaining minutes. You both are, the new Republican, leadership. You're young and everything else. And Richard, I know that, between you and balancing the decision to do what you're doing, we really do need to get. I believe that we deserve a two-party system here, and we're getting this year a little bit closer to that, but the numbers haven't increased. So how do people reach out and say to additional, maybe young or maybe not so young people, hey, look, we even if you're a card-carrying Democrat, you can't be happy with things just being rammed down your throat all the time.
This is something that I have found very hopeful as far as the people of Hawaii go. I'm a young Republican. I'm a very proud Republican. And people throughout the state of Hawaii understand that something's wrong. When I go out and I knock on their doors.
You must love to fight to say, hey, Richard, you must love the beef. You're Republican.
This is actually something that I believe, people, the people in the state of Hawaii are a lot like me. They don't care what party you belong to. All they know is that we have a host of problems here in the state, and they want them solved. Mm-hmm. And they can't tell exactly what the problems are, and they can't put their finger on them. They can't articulate about them very exactly what they are, but they know things need to change.
Well, look, let's ideologically, we know that there are differences between Republicans and Democrats. A high-profile Republican office holder who was replaced is now switching over to the Democrat Party. We've also seen other state senators that were Republicans that are Democrats. Some say, look, I'm only switching because that's the only way I can get things done.
I think that's a very poor way to approach things, is that if you can abandon your core principles in that manner, what does that say about your character and exactly who you are? It's the core principles that you actually stand on, that you actually want to take and articulate that message to the people of Hawaii, because it has a lot to do with fundamentally the issues that are at the core of the problems here in the state of Hawaii. And a lot of it is that you do anything to be in a position of power and influence, and
I'm really concerned and worried about that. That's why I'm thinking that that's why I was teasing when you were talking about it, because if Republicans going to go door-to-door campaign, you almost have to wear a helmet because you expect to get in there. I don't think, and I want to ask you both this question. I don't think that anybody, Republican or Democrat, wakes up in the morning thinking, let's go down to the Big Square building and see if we can screw the state up. They all believe they're doing the right thing.
I absolutely agree with that, and that's actually one of the more pleasant things that I found as a new elected official is that we do have a good group of people who sincerely love the state of Hawaii and the people of Hawaii, but just because I use this comparison when people come in outside of my office at the state capitol is the seal of the great state of Hawaii. And pigeons like to come and deposit things on top of that seal.
Yeah, amen.
Right, and what I say is these pigeons, they have great intentions. They're good. They just want to live their lives. But just because you have great intentions doesn't mean you're not going to deposit something that shouldn't be deposited on something that symbolizes the great people in the great state of Hawaii. It's the same thing. You can't. It doesn't matter if your intentions are good coming to the state legislature. What you do has to have a meaningful impact for the good on the people and the state of Hawaii. Mm-hmm. And if that's the standard that when you give an accountability, we have to hold ourselves to, is that are the people coming out of poverty? Are people being educated better? Is the quality of life improving? And I think that's something that we as young Republicans actually bring to the table, is that we want measurable standards.
Aaron on the island of Kauai, your question about taxes, unfortunately we are out of time. I won't be able to get to you, but Beth, in the few seconds we have, maybe you could also give us your thoughts as to what you think are the challenges ahead, because good job on the job well done, but there's still plenty up front, right?
Yeah, I think just making sure that this next go-around remains as conservative as we were able to keep this particular session. And then, again, just achieving balance. That's the biggest thing, is making sure that Republicans have a voice in the state.
Representatives Richard Fale and Beth Fukumoto, thanks for being with us. We come back after the top of the news here at the hour with more of the Mike Buck Show. Those of you that are still on hold, we'll get back into it. The news is next. It's 8 o'clock away.